Okay, thank you, and Minister and members of the panel, and thank you all for coming. Can you hear me at the back? If you can't, just let me know. Yes, this is an important day, and thank you for your participation. It's the beginning, as the Minister emphasized many times, of an extensive consultation period, community and the stakeholder engagement being at the very front, an integral part of working out the planning process. And I must say from the beginning, thanks to the Minister, the government has allocated extra resources to the departments, specifically to facilitate a good and solid consultation process, a modern consultation process. So over the next 3, 4, 5 months, but particularly intensely and extensively over the next 3 months, we'll be focusing on a range of consultation to get views and ideas as to how we build the next, as the panel and the department will be facilitating and encouraging all that to happen. I'm told we have about 240, 250 people here. Minister, I think it seems a bit more than that, but about that. I think a reasonably balanced representations, almost 40% of people here are from local government, which is good. And we've got 20% representing industry and 20% around representing peak groups, community groups, and the like. So it's a fair balance, and it should be good. It should encourage a good debate. I'm just going to very briefly make a few observations, and this is, in a sense, my view and hopefully the view of the department. It may not necessarily represent the view of the government, Minister, or the view of the panel, but there's sort of a few observations by way of lessons learned, so that hopefully they can be taken into account when we consider the new system. The Environmental Planning and Assessment Act, when introduced in 1979, was considered as a transforming piece of legislation. It was transforming because some of you were involved at the time, sort of saw it as moving from what used to be called town planning into environmental planning. It introduced a number of very significant initiatives. You know, the basis of sustainable development. It introduced the sort of components of strategic planning via the 3-tier process, environmental impact assessment procedures and requirements. It introduced an extensive range of public participation processes and appeal rights to specialized courts. So it's sort of, it was a transforming piece of legislation. Now, during 30+ years of operation, particularly during a period of extensive changes, quite considerable changes. It's up to others to say whether it had delivered on the outcome or not. Each one of us will have different views. But I notice, and I think it is important to recognize that the need for a new generation, a next generation planning system and planning legislation is beyond doubt. Why it didn't happen earlier? Well, that's a government priority in a sense, and this government and the government said that it is now a priority. So we're putting it as a priority, and we're getting on and doing it irrespective, and rightly so, because it is timely to have it. Now, just observing on a number of key big picture issues. The first one is the issue of strategic planning. The current Act, I suppose, struggles with an integrated strategic planning regime. And as I said before, and sort of I'm sure you all agree, when you don't have a solid integrated strategic planning framework, it becomes very difficult, very sort of time-consuming, very inefficient, and more than that, to facilitate good decision outcome for projects, for activities, and the like. You operate in a vacuum, and my colleague in the department struggle with that in terms of making sure that we deliver planning outcome, good planning outcome, but when you do that in a vacuum, it's very difficult to achieve that. And when I say integrated strategic planning, I'm not talking about the allocation of different activities and land uses under a strategy, conservation, or whatever, but I mean integrated in the context of integrated services and infrastructure as part of planning, particularly at the regional and local level. I'm talking about recognizing and understanding the economics and the cost and the benefit of not only different activities, but on the environment and amenity and the rest of it, understanding the changing nature of plans. So these are things that hopefully the new legislation will take more into account. And in particular, the relationship between strategic planning and what we call in our language development control, and the relationship between strategic planning and making decisions, because there will be opportunity to streamline those decisions and still deliver good outcome if we have a good strategic planning. The Minister mentioned, I think, in the introduction, the issue of government agencies, and the legislation hopefully may need to address or will address the strategic planning as far as its governance is concerned. That is, how can state, local governments come together to deliver an integrated approach? That's my first point. My second point relates to this issue of processes and outcomes. And the Minister mentioned the number of changes to the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. Actually, on average, we amended the Act 4 times every year, on average. So a total about 140 to 150 times over its existing, sometimes for good reasons, sometimes minor amendments, but that's...
Sometimes for bad reasons.
Sometimes, not necessary, no, but for good reasons. But the point that I'm trying to make is that those amendments were trying to, in a sense, cope with changes, rapid changes that's happening, and trying to address the requirements for a changing outcome, and the sort of the tension between processes and outcomes is an important one. Well, I hope that in designing the new legislative regime, we will focus a bit more on outcomes, and that's not going to be very easy because we sort of feel much more comfortable in our community dealing with processes. And if we lock ourselves into processes, then inevitably we'll have to endure changes. Things are going to change. Our cities, our towns, Sydney will be completely different to what it is today. And the pattern of, we're looking at some statistics in the department the other day about workforce patterns and the way that people are working either from home or from offices. Retails, the retail functions, the function of centers. We're going to see completely different pattern which we'll have to reflect. And therefore, the next generation legislation hopefully will focus on changes to reflect those outcomes. The third point, and this is one that's particularly relevant and can be done almost immediately, is the issue of infrastructure and services as an integral part of the planning system. And this is something that when we talk about housing delivering, employment delivering, we're still really struggling very much in trying to provide those services, those infrastructure in a way that can add value and can help a management growth strategy to be delivered. And this is another area that hopefully the new legislation will specifically address and put together. Now, I think these are the three big picture points. There are many, many others, but sort of maybe I can remark that irrespective of whatever legislation is going to happen to a certain extent, I really hope that this opportunity will be taken to also address some of the attitudinal issues, our cultural issues, the way that we deal with the planning system jointly, generally, and there is an opportunity to do that. outside the legislation. And yes, Minister, it will be delivered in 18 months. Yes, Minister, it will. And as many people sort of keep on asking me, a lot of people around here, I just want to let them know to relax, because whilst all this this important work will be going, this exciting work, the machinery of planning will still continue at an accelerated level. There are a lot of challenges that we're looking at to address issues of housing in particular, of infrastructure and others, and this work will continue whilst we're building this. So, you know, many of those people that have been asking that will need that. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for your contribution. We look forward to an ongoing productive debate. Thank you for listening to me.